Compound interest is probably single-handedly the biggest reason why Warren Buffett has been able to amass such a large amount of wealth. So if compounding is so important, what is it? Well, in this video, I'm going to be talking about what compounding is, how to work it out, and the wonders that compounding can do for yourself, and also what it's already done to Warren Buffett. So what is compound interest? Compound interest is simply interest on top of interest, or put more factually, compound interest is interest on savings calculated on both the initial principal and the accumulated interest from previous periods. As I said before, compound interest is simply interest on top of interest. So take the example of normal interest is just interest on top of the principal, i.e. if you put £1,000 into a bank account, you would only get the interest on that. And say you keep that in for 10 years, you'll consistently only get interest on your principal amount, the amount you put in at the very start. However, with compound interest, you get interest on top of the interest from last year. So let's say you put £1,000 in, you get 10% interest, that's £100 on top. So next year you have £1,100 to have 10% interest on. So then the next year you'll have £1,210, and it's compounding on top of compounding, and it's really in the later years where it takes massive effect. So if we take some very simple examples and say you've put £100 into a saving account that is guaranteed to give you 10% compounded for 5 years. At the end of them 5 years, you would have £165 in that account from your original 100 has now turned into 165. Whereas if you had a normal interest bank account, which was still returning the exact same 10% a year, you would have at the end of them 5 years £150 in that account. Now that's only a difference of £15. However, it's when we really extrapolate this into the long term when it starts to make a huge difference. So now, instead of doing 5 years, let's talk about 50 years, and this is where you really see the stark difference. So we'll go with the same accounts, one with £100 in at the start, and that's compounded at 10% annually for 50 years. At the end of them 50 years, you would have around £14,500 in that account. Whereas if you simply had £100 in an account and it had a 10% interest that wasn't compounded, at the end of them 50 years, you'd only have around £600. That's a difference of £3,900, or 24 times your money, it being in the compounded account rather than the standard interest account. The true power of compounding comes in time. Compounding is extremely powerful, but it needs enough time, enough of a runway to run to actually make a really meaningful difference. If we go to the same account that was £100 invested at 10% compounded for 50 years, we'll look at the first 10 years. That in the first 10 years, your £100 investment turned into 270. Whereas by year 40, your £100 had turned into roughly £5,400. But if we look at the year 40 mark, which is the 5,400, compared to the next 10 years, in 10 years that 5,400 turned into 14,000, over 14,500 pounds, which is a massive, that's £9,000 accrued in 10 years compared to the first 10 years, which was only 270. Time has been Warren Buffett's biggest beneficiary towards his wealth. Pair that with compound interest, and it's done wonders for how much money he's ended up to accrue. If we look at this graph of Warren Buffett's wealth, you can see at 83 he's worth close to 60 billion, but only at 59 he was only worth 3.8 billion. Now that's a huge stark difference. It's nearly 20 times less than what he was worth when he's 83, and that, as you can see in the shape of the graph, that's the true power of compounding. Each year, Warren Buffett releases a letter to shareholders for Berkshire Hathaway. And in this, he outlines the track record that Berkshire Hathaway has managed to get each year compared to the S&P 500. So as we can see in 2021's annual report, he's compounded capital from 1965 to 2021, that's 56 years, at 20.1% annually. That means every $1 invested with him in 1965 is now worth just a little bit over $70,000. Or made more simply, if you invested $1,000 with him in 1965, you would have today around $70.5 million, which is an astounding amount to say that you've never put another penny in, you just simply put £1,000 in. And don't get me wrong, in 1965, £1,000 was worth more than it is worth now. But even if we go and speculate that it's worth roughly the buying power of about £10,000 now, it's not that much money that people wouldn't have been able to afford to give it to Warren Buffett at the time. However, looking back in hindsight, that is 2020, and most people wouldn't have known the track record that he could have produced. Something that would have been a lot more simpler to predict was that the American economy as a whole from 1965 to now was going to grow. And that's all you had to believe, was that from the inception of America, as it grew all the way up to 1965, you had to believe that it could continue growing consistently. And as we can see, from 1965 to 2021, the market in the same time has produced, on average, 10.5%. That means if you simply started by investing $100 a month in 1965 and never increased it, and continuously did it till today, which $100 a month now would be a lot less than it was back then, you would have a little over 4 million now, without any time spent trying to predict the market or analyse companies. You were simply growing with the average of the top 500 US companies. So simply, all you've got to believe is that it continuously gets, the economy in the US is going to get more and more efficient, it's going to grow, and that's all you had to believe. You didn't have to try and predict any market cycles when there was recessions. You consistently, every month, didn't even look at what the stock market was doing, you just kept putting that $100 in and never increased it. Now, don't get me wrong, if you compounded capital at Warren Buffett's 20.1% with the same $100 going in each month, the difference is very stark, but you would have had to do a hell of a lot more analysis. And also, there's not many people out there, I don't think there's no one with the same sort of track record with the amount of money Warren Buffett's managing as well, that has managed to do it for 56 years solid. So it's highly unlikely that we would be able to do it. If you did manage to do it and you compounded at the same rate as Warren Buffett for 56 years, you would have a little over 427 million now, which, don't get me wrong, is a lot better than what you did get with the 4 million. However, there is something to be said about the time and the stress spent trying to pick stocks, trying to beat the market, and the fact that you can still get a very adequate return by not having to do anything or worry. And £4 million now would sort you out, it'd sort your family out. And if you keep leaving that in, it would only grow larger and larger and larger. If you left that money in for 56 years, you've got a little over 4 million. However, if you leave it in for another 10 years, for 66 years, it goes up to 11 million, close to 11.5 million, which is, again, you've nearly tripled it on top in that last 10 years again. So you can see how compounding is massively in your favour when you're going over long periods of time. I hope this video has made your eyes open to the power of compounding and how you need to leave it for long periods of time to really let it work. If you've liked this video, please drop it a like, and also subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more content like this, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.